Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Elena and here I talk about all kinds of books. Today I'm going to talk about everything I read in July and August. There were 19 books total. 6 of those were 5-star reads and 1 of them I had to DNF. A lot of these were new releases and I feel like I went through a lot of moods in these 2 summer months. You'll see the genres are very, very different, but there was a surprising amount of horror that I read this summer. We can jump right in with a finished Romantasy duology that I read this summer. In July, I read One Dark Window, and in August, I read Two Twisted Crowns. These are gothic romantasy, part of the Shepherd King duology. So essentially in book 1, Elspeth, she has this monster living in her mind. He keeps her secrets, but nothing comes for free, especially magic. She joins this quest to save her kingdom alongside the king's nephew. It's very high stakes, there's cool magic in it. I didn't give it 5 stars because I think my expectations were just way too high. So many people have been recommending this book and loving this book, and I really wanted to love it, but it just wasn't as unique as everyone said it was. It was fun, and I think that if I went in with no expectations, I would have probably enjoyed it more. Nevertheless, I really still wanted to give it a shot, so I did read book 2. I probably wouldn't have continued the series after the first book, but I bought both physical books, and I felt really bad not reading a physical book that's on my shelf. The first half of this book is so slow and it takes so long to get into the story. The second half is much cooler and much more interesting. I would give each of these books 4 stars because I do think that the writing was good and the story was interesting. It just wasn't my top read and it wasn't super memorable. I've been seeing a lot online about Rachel Gillig's other book, The Night and the Moth. Supposedly it's really good, but I'm worried about going into another one of this author's books with high expectations. If you've read the Shepherd King duology and The Night and the Moth, let me know if it's still worth it for me to read The Night and the Moth. Next we have another fantasy book, The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. I think maybe I'm not Joe's target audience. I really wanted to keep an open mind and try something new, and I got about 150 pages into this book, but nothing much was really happening. It was all vibes, no plot. The writing wasn't bad, there was just nothing that pulled me in and made me want to keep reading it. I have heard that it gets a little bit more interesting and more action-packed further down the road. I really tried. I picked this up multiple times and I just couldn't do it. 550 pages of just vibes isn't going to cut it for me. The 150 pages that I did read really reminded me of The Suicide Squad. I remember watching it in theaters and thinking, wow, this is so cool. I love these characters. It's filmed in such a cool way. And then at the very end, there's like a little bit of plot and you're like, huh? That's exactly the energy that this book gave me. Apparently James Cameron bought the rights to this book, so it might be made into a movie. And maybe I'll watch it, but we'll see. The book just did not speak to me. If you've continued past the 150 pages and you think it's worth pushing through, let me know. Next in the Romantasy section, we have The Silversmith by L.J. Claren. This was recommended by Kayla Books. I really love this creator. I love her content. I read a lot of what she recommends. But you let me down, Kayla. There are a lot of great tropes here. The yearning is so good. There's the grumpy sunshine dynamic. A brief synopsis without spoilers would be just that the main character Ari finds out that she has to save the world from dark magic. She needs to get to the kingdom to join forces with the prince, and her escort is this hot, broody, mysterious man. This book could have been really good, but what ruined it for me is that the female main character is constantly trying to get with the male main character, and he's constantly shutting her down. I don't like that. I want the male main character to be obsessed with the girl. He just keeps turning her down. It makes me so mad. I was so embarrassed for her, I couldn't even enjoy the book. A generous 3 stars for Silversmith. Next we have Kiss of the Basilisk by Lindsay Straub. If you have normal taste in books, you can just skip over to the next chapter now. Okay. Now that hopefully those who shouldn't hear this have moved on to the next chapter, we can talk about this book. First of all, it's part of the Split or Swallow series. I feel like Romantasy is too gentle of a name for this, whatever this genre is. This is book 1 of the series, and book 2 comes out this November. The premise is all girls that are born the same year as the prince, on the year that they turn 20, they have to go into the caves and meet their basilisk The basilisk is in human form, and they learn how to pleasure a man. After their training with the insatiable serpent men, they need to win the prince over with their new skills, and the prince chooses his wife among these girls. This premise is outrageous, and I could not put this book down. 80% of this is just straight smut, but surprisingly, the plot is really captivating. I think 35% into this book, I looked at how far along I was, and I was like, how much more can they say? So much has already happened. It is a wild ride from start to finish. I don't even know if it's good. I just know that I couldn't put it down and that I can't stop thinking about it still. 5 big fat gold stars for this book. We're gonna move on to sci-fi. Surprisingly, I only read one sci-fi book over the summer, even though it's a genre that I do enjoy. I guess I just wasn't in the mood for it. I was in the mood for whatever Kiss of the Basilisk was. For sci-fi, we have Memory Collectors. There's a company called Aeon Expeditions that allows you to travel back to the past and relive 1 hour without affecting the future. 4 strangers go on this expedition. They all end up in the same place at the same time, and they get stuck. It's kind of like a mystery, figuring out why did they get stuck, why are they all in the same place, and you learn more about each character. It's a nice message of appreciating what you have and living in the moment. What I found confusing is there are way too many perspectives, and it kind of goes back in time, and it was a little bit confusing for me. That's why I'd give this book 4 stars. Next, let's talk about some magical realism. So magical realism, if you're not familiar with it, is when the setting is our real world, but something magical or supernatural kind of happens in it. By the queen of magical realism, Ashley Poston, I read Sounds Like Love. What's really exciting about this book is I got it as a signed copy from Aardvark. I think it's really cool. I really like Ashley Poston's other books, especially The Dead Romantics. Honestly, I'll read anything she writes. This book is about a songwriter who's in a writing slump. She has this connection with an ex-boy band singer, and they have to come together to kind of sort that out. I liked it, but there's a part of the story that's so similar to Abby Jimenez's Say You'll Remember Me. It made it just feel unoriginal. I think if I had read this one first, maybe this one would have been 5 stars and that one wouldn't. But because I read Abby Jimenez first, this one just felt unoriginal. The book is about family, love, finding ourselves, and I would say it's a solid 4-star read. Next we have Shark Heart. I was really excited about this read, not only because of the beautiful cover, but because I've heard so much amazing feedback about this book online. I think this book, once again, is a victim of my high expectations. The premise of this book is very original. It's about a newlywed couple and the husband is slowly turning into a great white shark. It is really beautifully written, and I'm surprised that this is a debut novel. I really love the characters. They're so relatable. I love their love. There's a deep dive into other characters in the book later on outside of the main couple. I think I really wanted more of the couple rather than anyone's backstory or parents, family, or whatever. I loved the idea of the book, and I would give it a solid 4 stars just because towards the end I had to really push myself to get through to the end of the book. We're going to bundle together fiction and romance because some of these have a kind of romantic subplot anyways, so we're just going to do all those together. First of all, let's talk about Among Friends by Hal Ebbett. This book is about 2 families who have been friends for a very long time, and their lives are very intertwined. The dads have been best friends since university. Both families have teenage daughters. They get together one day and something happens that changes the course of their friendship. Aside from this one incident, there isn't really anything that happens in the book. The entire book is kind of everyone's internal monologue. None of the characters are likable or relatable. There's one that's kind of nice, but then still ends up kind of shitty. Book of the Month classified this writing as highbrow. I didn't hate the book. I think it's definitely something that critics would love, but maybe readers would hate. This might be one of the most hated Book of the Month reads based on the reader feedback in the app. I did give it 4 stars because I actually liked the writing. I thought it was really flowery and really beautifully written, I guess. However, the subject matter kind of sucks, and it's not a novel that really stood out for me. Okay, next we have The Compound by Aisling Rawle. This book is about a reality dating show set inside a compound in the middle of the desert. The contestants have individual challenges that they have to keep secret. They have to complete a task and they get a prize. There are also group challenges that everyone in the group has to complete in order for them to get their prize. The prizes really vary from basic things like pajamas or makeup to larger things like furniture, or food. The narrator's name is Lily, and she's on this compound, and she just really loves stuff. I read this as part of one of my book clubs, and a lot of the girls in my book club really hated the narrator and really struggled to get through the book. Lily is really materialistic, and she constantly talks about not really having anything going on outside of this, and she's not the smartest. I actually like that because I think it was a good part of the story. Some parts of this feel slow, and then some parts are super action-packed. This book was described as Love Island meets Lord of the Flies, and I don't think that that's a very accurate description. There was one character in the book that actually scared me, so that was cool. I rated this 4 stars, probably partially because of my high expectations of the book, but partially also because it took me a really long time to get through it. I started it as an audiobook when I went on a road trip, and then when I came back, it was just hard to get back into the swing of listening to an audiobook, and it took me forever to get through, so I think it just dragged on for me a little bit. However, I still remember a lot of details of this book, which leads me to believe that it was a pretty great read. Okay, next is actually a French book. It's called La Femme qui fuit. The English version of this is called Suzanne. I recently went on a road trip to Montreal, and I went into a French bookstore. I was curious about some of the local authors, and when I got to that table where it had the Quebec author section, I didn't know a single book or a single author. It made me think, oh my goodness, I live in Canada and I don't know a single thing about Quebec literature. I need to educate myself a little. So I looked up highly rated books by French-Canadian authors, and this is one of my picks. I bought a few others that I haven't yet read. This book is a fictionalized account of the author's grandmother. Her name was Suzanne Meloche, and she was a French-Canadian poet and artist. She left her family when her kids were little. I've never read a book in second-person narrative, so it was definitely a very strange experience. It was like she was telling her grandmother her story. Everything was like, you grew up in a big family, you moved to Montreal for school. The narrator hires a private investigator to look into her grandma's life after her grandma passes. With the information that she finds out, she kind of pieces together her life. Her grandmother lived through a really significant time in Quebec history. I actually learned so much about Quebec while reading this book. The book was really captivating and it was interesting, but there was a point where we get to the part of the grandma story where she leaves her family, and that's when I was just crying, and the book took a really big turn for me at that time. This novel also explores the notions of feminism and familial obligation. It is so beautifully written. I'm 100% giving this 5 stars. My only complaint is who decided that this was an appropriate design of this book? This is the most narrow book I've ever read. Look at these pages. I'm not sure who made this print decision, but it's very unusual. Next, we have a thriller, mystery, locked room, whodunit, Party of Liars by Kelsey Cox. This is so fun. It's set at a lavish Sweet 16 party in this gigantic house with big windows all along one side, and it's like kind of at the top of a hill. And they say you can look into it like it's a dollhouse. The house is rumored to be haunted. During the Sweet 16 party, a death occurs, and for the entire book, you're kind of learning about the main characters and everyone's perspectives. You're trying to figure out who died and what happened to the person who died. I would say the trigger warning here is postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis, anxiety. If that is a trigger for you, then maybe don't read this book. I love the setting of this book. I love the vibe of it. And I would definitely give it 5 stars because I couldn't guess what was going to happen. And I love when I don't guess the ending of a thriller type of book. Next, we have another type of mystery, and that's These Summer Storms. There was so much hype around this book when it was being released, and it didn't live up to that hype. It's an easy read, but it's just not that memorable. It was described as being so cutthroat and mysterious and set on this island. It was just really anticlimactic. It's about this insanely rich family, and the dad dies, so the wife and their adult kids get together on the family island. They have to have these inheritance games where everyone has a specific task, and everyone needs to complete their tasks in order for them all to get their inheritance. I expected like mystery thriller, but it was more just fiction, I would say, and it has an okay romantic subplot, but that's really all this book has going for it. 3 stars, if that. Next, we have another couple romance books. So the first one is My Favorite Holiday by Lauren Blakely. This was self-published last year, but it's being republished with the traditional publisher later this year. I got this as an advanced reader copy from NetGalley and the publisher in exchange for my honest review. Okay, so for the first half of the book, I really had an open mind and I really was trying to enjoy the book. I thought it would be a light, fluffy Christmas romance. As the book went on, though, I found myself kind of annoyed with the billionaire trope, which is disappointing because it's a trope that I actually kind of enjoy. But there's just too much money being thrown around, and it had me kind of rolling my eyes at some point. Overall, I liked the characters, I just found that they lacked any depth. The storylines were really cliche, and I think the author tried to fit way too many tropes into the story without actually developing any of them. By the end of this book, I was kind of glad that it was over. I really hung on to the good parts of this book, and the spice was good. I just wish there was more of it. 3 stars. Okay, and the last romance book that I read this summer was another advanced reader copy. Thank you to NetGalley and to St. Martin's Press for this book. It's called Most Eligible by Isabel Engel. This book is really cute and fun. The main character, Georgia, she goes on to a dating show for the wrong reasons. She's an investigative journalist and she wants to expose the producers for mistreating the contestants. On night 1 of the show, she finds out that the host is this country singer that she hooked up with a year ago. As a fan of the Bachelor series in general, I really liked this kind of insider look at the reality dating world. However, I didn't feel like the female main character really had enough opportunity to get to know the lead of the show. I think in real life, they get a little bit more time to talk to each other because it seemed like they barely interacted. There's also a bit of the miscommunication, misunderstanding trope, which I always dislike. The main love interest in this book is good. And there's this one scene with the sunset that is just, it's good. The writing here is great and it's laugh out loud funny. Overall, it's a good time and it's a fun, easy read. I gave this book a solid 4 stars. All right, the last genre of the month is horror, and I read 4 horror books over the summer. The first one is called House of Beth, and honestly, I loved this book. It's not very long, it's a super easy read, and it's a solid 5 stars. The main character, Cassie, has a low-paying job. She's really struggling with her career, and she has very intrusive, very violent thoughts that kind of prevent her from having any close relationships or really getting near anybody for fear of what she might do. After an incident at work, she's like, peace out, I'm leaving, I'm going to my dad's house. She ghosts everyone and she shows up at her dad's house. He's not there. He's on vacation somewhere. So she's home alone and then she goes to this bar and she reconnects with her best friend growing up who never left their hometown. This best friend, he recently lost his wife, so he's kind of going through something. Very quickly, they kind of get together and Cassie goes from this big city, low-paying job to now being a wife and homeschooling stepmother. She's living in the shadow of Beth, the deceased wife, who was very much a traditional wife, homeschooling, baking, doing all the stuff that Cassie kind of struggles with. The first half of this book is genuinely scary. I'm like, what is going to happen? Who let this woman be around children? Like, what is she going to do? And then the second half of the book takes a very interesting turn, and then it's just kind of really unexpected. It's not at all what I thought it would be. Honestly, a really great, solid read that keeps you at the edge of your seat. Another strange one was The Hounding. This is also from my Aardvark book subscription. I was really looking forward to it because the description of it is kind of wacky, and this cover is kind of wacky, and I just love that kind of stuff, so that's why I picked this book. This one is a short read that felt like a long read. It's about 5 sisters that live with their grandfather. The ages of these sisters range from like 7-ish years old to I think early 20s. They live near this small village where there's just so much gossip. This rumor starts to spread that the sisters are actually dogs. There's one character in this book that I really hate. I think that's kind of the point of this character, but every time he was mentioned or it was his perspective, I just hated it. The book felt slow, but it really picks up at the end. I think aside from the things that actually happen in this book, it's really interesting how it explores the theme of fear and hatred of the unknown or the misunderstood. It's a very strange concept, but one that I think will stick with me, which is why I give it 4.5 stars. Okay, the next one is a horror novella, and I got it from NetGalley, although it is already out. I think it was released in May of this year. It's called Pam Kowalski is a Monster. I have a spoiler-free review of this on my channel. Essentially, the premise is 20 years ago, Pam Kowalski ruined Janet Kwan's life in AP Physics. Janet Kwan, all these years later, she's working a dead-end job and she still blames Pam for all of her kind of misfortunes and her not living up to her potential. One day, Janet finds out that Pam Kowalski is actually the Madam Pamela, who is this internet sensation psychic. Janet goes on a mission to destroy Pam and out her as a phony. It is funny and creepy and just a crazy ride. It's such an enjoyable read. I really loved this novella. So action-packed and so rage-fueled. It's just a fun, easy read. And then the last horror book that I read is What Hunger by Katherine Dang. I also have a spoiler-free review of this one on my channel. Sometimes when I finish a book, I don't immediately know what I'm going to rate it. I need to sleep on it. With this particular book, I actually needed to wait a few days before I could think about what an accurate rating for it was, and ultimately I landed on 5 stars. In the story, we follow this angsty 14-year-old girl who's dealing with grief and generational trauma from first-generation Vietnamese immigrant parents. She goes to a party and something happens, and after this, she develops this very intense, insatiable craving for raw meat. Being inside the mind of a 14-year-old girl is a lot, but it's also really entertaining. I felt that this novel did a really, really good job of representing the generational and cultural difference between kids who grew up in a Western world and their first-generation immigrant parents that just had a completely different life before. It's a really delicate balance of honoring your parents' wishes and being understanding of their culture, but also just being a regular kid in the environment that you live in. This book was creepy in a way that really keeps you at the edge of your seat. The characters are really well written and really relatable, and the ending was really good, and I definitely recommend this book. Let me know if you've read any of these and what your thoughts were, or if you're planning on adding any of these to your TBR. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and let's chat more about books. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe to keep up with more book content. I recently posted a spooky season TBR, and you're not going to want to miss that. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you again next time.